the Miami Heat, everyone's favorite team. We're going to recap the season that they had coming up right now. Michael Bolton, are you a Heat lifer?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and even though I'm not on the court playing, I'm still going to criticize. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_Beeble, on TikTok at redrock_Beeble, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA, for a first deposit match up to $100. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we're available for all you blokes to double bang on all platforms. So thumb it up, comments, bells, all of that stuff. Draft prospect time is here. Not today, not this show, but this week we're going to start knocking out some of the, we do this every single year, you know that. We're going to knock out some of those draft prospects during the week. Which prospects are on deck for this week? That's a really good question. We're going to be looking at, just having a look, who's actually up. We're going to do a Ron Holland deep dive, Daron Holmes, Tijon Salan, Zachary Ricochet, I think Bronny James as well might be coming up this week. So get ready. We're going to have a lot of draft stuff coming during the week. What we're here to talk about, though, now is the Miami Heat. I think it's always important to realize that everybody has biases. It's important, I believe, to acknowledge those biases. I will tell you those things all the time. I hope I do anyway. I'll tell you what I think and why it happens and all that sort of stuff. And I think I might have a bias against the Miami Heat for one very specific reason. Every single fan base has delusional fans. Every single fan base does. But there is not a team that has more of them that enter into my mentions than this Miami Heat team. It is astonishing. And I was preparing to say this on this show anyway, just to give you a background of where I sit on all this stuff, because I just think this team has unbelievable PR, stuff that doesn't actually marry up with what is reality. I was going to talk about all that, and then I put out a rather innocuous tweet after Jalen Brunson broke his hand in Game 7 against the Pacers. We can talk about the narrative around the Knicks later. That's another thing. And I said, man, the injuries have been really brutal in these playoffs, right? Which is true. There's so many guys out. I didn't even say why I think that is, and all that sort of stuff. Didn't say anything about that. So first comment to that is, the Heat would have cakewalked the East. Bro, the Heat played in the East with a bunch of guys injured. They had injuries, but every other team did, and they got spanked. And they played all season to put themselves into the 8th seed, and they got spanked. This level of delusion and the craziness that comes into my mentions with this team does make me, it does turn me against them. So bear all that in mind when I talk about the biases that we all have, but I have one against this team because of this, the stuff that I hear is it dwarfs other teams. We good with that? So all of you Heat haters who are going to comment on this, Heat lovers who think I'm a hater, understand where it comes from. I believe, try to provide balanced perspective on stuff. But if you think that it's leaning one way, that's why. That's why. Is it fair? Probably not. But whatever. We're not always fair in life. Let's talk about this team. I don't know why I hit that same stinger. I meant to hit this one because we're going to talk about the team overview, what happened for this team during the season. Like a few teams before them, the Golden State Warriors and the Sacramento Kings, the Heat finished 46-36. They actually did make the playoffs, so they had a net rating of plus 1.7, the 21st best offense and the 5th best defense, which, again, if I'm going to criticize them, Eric Spoelstra is probably the best coach in the NBA. I don't think there's much debate about that. That defensive effort is huge to be able to get up to 5th. But their roster, there was huge red flags to me about it in the offseason. They got worse than last season, and it played out pretty much exactly as it was expected. 46-36. Their preseason over-under was 45.5, so that's legitimately bang on. I had them at, what did I have them at? 43 initially, then bumped them to 45, so absolutely bang on as well. hit the 45 and a half. I went the under. We actually got that wrong, but it is pretty close in terms of what they are as a team. And for a team that did make the Eastern Conference Finals the year before, projecting them around this sort of mark may have seemed disrespectful to some, but again, it was just legitimately bang on. In the draft, they have 2 picks, both their own. Pick 15 and pick 43. They might be able to do something good with 15. It is a tougher task in this sort of a draft. People act like the Heat have a specific thing that they always do. They don't. You can look at their last 2 picks. Old man Jaime Jaquez, very raw Nikola Jovic. All right, completely different players. Completely different archetypes. So don't get it into your head again, the narrative. The Heat are just always going to take Heat guys. The Heat are just going to take established, ready-to-play players. Not true. I'm not saying that they won't do that, but I'm also not saying that they will. It's just not true. That is all they do. The lineup stuff was a little bit interesting. Their most common starting group. They did have some injuries during the season, obviously, like everybody did. Not true, not everybody. Kings were pretty safe. Thunder and Wolves were really healthy all year. The most common starters, Rozier, Duncan Robinson, who was just out of the rotation last season, Jim Butler, Nikola Jovic, Little Chungus, and Bam Adebayo. Very interesting group there. No Tyler Herro, obviously missed a lot of time during the year. Their best lineup, well, the forward spots, they're the same. Jimmy, Jovic, and Bam. The guards were different. It was actually Tyler Herro and Caleb Martin, not Duncan Robinson and Terry Rozier. That lineup was only a plus 5.2, so it's not like a plus 20 or anything like that. The other group, the most common starters, was a negative 5. So a decent swing by putting Herro and Martin in versus Rozier and Robinson. I think most people, without ever looking at the numbers, would have said, I think you win more with Rozier and Robinson than you would with Martin and Herro. I would think most people would suggest that, but the numbers obviously did not bear that out. The free agency for this squad, there are 4 restricted guys. Only one of them really matters, and that is Haywood Highsmith, even if he matters at all. He was a guy that would start, he would play well, he would move to the bench, he would get DMP'd, he'd move back into the rotation, back to starting, back out of the rotation, back to being DMP'd. He's a little bit all over the place. He's older as well. And the other guys are their 3 two-way players, Jamal Cain, Alondes Williams, and Cole Swider. Again, the narrative on this team is, well, watch out, anyone the Heat picks up, undrafted guy, two-way guy, they're all going to develop into something good. No, they do hit on guys, but no, we don't really care about these players. It's not always going to be the case. The unrestricted guys, Patty Mills was on this team. Cool, not really sure if he gets a deal anywhere. Delon Wright was actually very, very impactful, and we knew that they needed point guards. They didn't have really any guards, and Delon was strong. He is older, and he's a guy that dealt with a lot of knee problems. They'd be pretty smart to look to bring him back, but we'll see whether they actually can afford that or not. The the player options, there's a lot of guys with player options. Joshie Richardson, who's got like a $3 million player option. I don't think he picks it up, although season ended with shoulder surgery. Caleb Martin's got a $7.1 million player option. He's also extension eligible. There's no way he's going to pick up a $7.1 million player option. There's no way that's happening. He's worth more than that at this point. And there's Kevin Love and Thomas Bryant. Love, I think, will probably pick that up. Bryant would probably want to because I don't think anyone's paying him more than that. The interesting one will be what Richardson does. It's about $3 million his deal. And then Martin on that contract there as well. Only one guy on a non-guarantee, and that is Orlando Robinson, who I thought showed good signs early in the season, but did really, really struggle down the stretch. And I'm losing a little bit of faith in him developing into a permanent rotation guy. And then the big thing is going to be 2 players who could be playing on expiring contracts next season. And one of those is General Saunders himself, Jim Butler. And the other one is Duncan Robinson, who has an early termination option in the 25 or for the 25-26 season. Jimmy's got a player option worth $52 million for the 25-26 season. Now, this is out there now, so I can talk about it a little bit more because I did float this. I shouldn't have said anything back in February. I said, hey, there's something I found out about the Heat, and if you found out about it and it comes true, you'll laugh. But I couldn't say anything, and I shouldn't have even put that part out. But it is out now. The thing that I had heard, and we're hearing this now, is that the Heat may not, and probably will not, offer Jimmy Butler a full max extension. All right? And we've heard that come out from multiple places now. It's not that it's concrete. It's more that it's like, yeah, there's a pretty decent chance they don't offer him this extension. And the other part of that I heard, and we've also heard reported in many spots now as well, is that if they don't offer Jimmy the extension, well, Jimmy will request a trade. So I don't know whether that will happen or not. I do know that $52 million for Jimmy Butler, not even 24-25, in 25-26, plus $60 million for 2 years after that, is a terrible, terrible contract and will basically hamstring your entire team. It will be instantly one of the worst, if not the worst contract in the NBA, if he signs that. Do the Heat value what Jimmy does for winning them nothing over the last 3 years and his longevity as a player? I don't know. But what I heard was they did not want to offer him an extension, and if he didn't get extended, he would request a trade. Now, both of those things may happen. One may not. One may happen. Who knows? But it has been reported, I think, in enough spots now that I feel more confident in saying it. But that is a real interesting wrinkle to the offseason. I'm not really sure what other way I would put that. Chew on that for a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Is it? It should be, but I didn't bring the thing up. Let's try it again. Today's episode is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. If you want to grow your portfolio, you can deal with the rising costs of inflation, pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much whatever it is that's standing in your way between you having financial freedom and the other stuff that you're doing in your life. Well, Yahoo Finance gives you the access to news, to data, and the tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Everyone gets involved with looking at that. They can link your portfolios up, whether you're that seasoned investor, someone just looking for that extra guidance, someone starting out new. Yahoo Finance gives you the tools and the data that you need in one place. It is the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, breaking news, original editorial perspectives, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. So, when you head across to Yahoo Finance, go get in there, link it up. With over a community of over 90 million users, their real strength is helping you to find your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That is, of course, yahoofinance.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. The playoffs are here. NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. We're almost at the conference finals. And Prize Picks is just a great way, as America's number one fantasy sports app. You and over 3 million members can get in there, and it's just exciting to be able to put those players and their individual stat projections and choose the more or less than side of it. Up to 6 of them, minimum of 2. Stick them together in an entry, and bang, Bob's your uncle. You can actually win up to 100 times your entry fee with just 4 correct picks. $10 can be transformed into 1,000 playing on NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball season, many, many other sports as well. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Download that app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Price Picks, pick more, pick less. It is that easy. All right, so we've chewed on Jimmy Butler a little bit, giggity. That's the wrong button again. I am just, for some reason, just having a not great day here. It's all right. I'll be okay. Don't worry. Let's talk about James, because he's in this position now where, for some reason, I don't know why the PR on this guy is so strong. He's funny at times, yeah. He's irreverent. He plays very hard. He's very good. But people act like he's the greatest player in the world at times. Oh, look at Jimmy. He works so hard. He gets up at 3 a.m. Okay. Doesn't actually do anything to help you that much, my guy. I don't know. There's just this expectation or this narrative around Jimmy, who's just honestly never been the level of play that suggests. You hear, like, the memes were out of control. Jimmy doesn't care about basketball in November. Watch what happens in March. Then he's the MVP. Well, actually, no, he was way worse in March. Well, wait till playoff Jimmy hits. Okay. I had to look at his EPM, regular season versus playoffs. Nothing would suggest that it's playoff Jimmy. Oh, but look what he did last year. Yeah, he was great a couple of games against the Bucks, and then he got hurt, and he didn't really do anything for the rest of the playoffs. He was just mid. So be really cautious about these narratives. that surround players. He was 47th in fantasy -1 this season, 45th in points. His ADP was 25. I got sucked in. I actually drafted him. I don't know why I did it. Probably because the draft pick was at 3 a.m. and I got up and had to make it. In 30 deep, I drafted him like pick 22. It killed my season. That's why I was done. He's 35. He played 34 minutes. He averaged 21 points with a 3, 5.3 rebounds and 5 assists with 1.3 steals. Shot 50 and 86. Very low turnover guy. We know this. Shot 41% on threes, which is probably the best number of his career. I think it is very easily. 52 on his twos, which is a downgrade. What he really gets by on is getting to the line a ton. 86% is great. It's not as good as 89, and there is an impact on that. But also his steals just fell away completely. At this age, you do worry about him entirely relying upon free throws. Not entirely, but close enough to that. You worry about the steals. You worry about where usage goes and minutes goes. You worry about what happens if he is on a different team. The comparisons for him were actually pretty amazing because it was not like his season was bad. It was actually really good from an overall impact perspective. It wasn't great for fantasy because steals fell way off, field goal percentage under 50, free throws down. Year 9 Manu Ginobili was the best comp, and Year 12 Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, first time I've ever seen that name appear on these comps. And you want to know what year 12 Michael Jordan was? It was the second season in the 2 three-peats. Well, sorry, it's the second season of the second three-peat. 97, 98, that season. Unbelievable, yeah? Jimmy was 96th in EPM, 96th percentile, 98th in crafted plus minus. Incredibly impactful player. What I would caution is his offensive load was down to 87th percentile. That's still really good. It's also the lowest number in 6 years for Jimmy, meaning he just wasn't as involved in the offense. He is going to be 35. I would expect that offensive load, he cannot handle that larger offensive load much, and that'll probably continue to drop as we move forward. And if the steals stay lower, everything will just continue to fall away. Like, I wouldn't touch this bloke in top 2 rounds next season. Probably wouldn't do it in round 3 either, to be honest. Maybe a round 4 guy, but even this season, on a per game basis, end of round 4 is where he's sat. And we know that his body doesn't handle the NBA season at this advanced age. I'm not sure if that's got anything to do with past minutes at any point in his career. Who's to say? We don't really have enough of a sample size to know about how that works. But yeah, pretty, I think overall, disappointing season from Jimmy, even if a lot of the impact stuff and the per minute, per game stuff was impressive. It did let us down a little bit for fantasy, and there are going to be some implications of that as we move forward. But everything could be turned completely upside down if, in fact, he is traded. Like, I don't know what would happen there. Let's talk about Bam Bam Adebayo. Another guy that, yeah, he's a really good player. No one's debating this. There is a lot of people where he's actually the best defender in the NBA. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. He's great. He's this awesome, should be top 2 on the second All NBA team. I'm not sure about that. He's good. He's really good. I like what Bam does. But again, I think there's a little over-exaggeration about what he brings. We're getting to the stage, though, him being 27, Butler being 35, that he needs to become the best player on this team. And I'm not sure that he can. He was 33rd in -1 ranks, 48th on Yahoo, 31st in points. His ADP was 32, so it sort of just delivered what we wanted. 19 and 10 with almost 4 assists, 1.1 steals and 0.9 blocks. And we know as a big man that they are bad block numbers. He was able to up his usage this season. Wouldn't say the efficiency was super strong, 52 from the field, 76 from the line. They're not, 52 is good, but this is a center we're talking about relative to position that's really bad. And 76 from the line is fine. It's not strong, it's not weak, it's fine. He shot 36% on his threes, but he never takes them. His usage has fallen, his assist rate has fallen ever since Kyle Lowry arrived, but now Lowry's gone, and it didn't really bump back up. So that role of him as this center facilitator doesn't appear like it's coming back. The 2 best comps for him were, unbelievably, year 7 of Yusuf Nurkic and year 8 of Yusuf Nurkic. Nurkic, not a great finisher, low field goal percentage player, decent assist numbers, not a good shot blocker. Bam's obviously better, but it's the general shape, it's the advance, it's the impact where he sits there. He was 88th percentile EPM, 93rd in CPM. They're obviously awesome. This is where you worry. Look, the defense was great, and he plays a they play a different sort of scheme. I know this, but for us from a fantasy point of view, 23rd percentile in contesting shots at the rim. So maybe it's not that he's a terrible shot blocker, it's that he just never does it. Will that ever change? Will he ever be put into position to challenge at the rim more? Because that's how he becomes like a top 20 fantasy guy, is actually like, get some blocks, mate. Can he ever sustain as a 24-point scorer? I don't think so. I'm not sure the assists are ever coming back. He's never going to be a 3-point shooter. It's about that, and that's a strikingly low number of like just shots that you're contesting at the rim. Like, it's very, very low. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to take home a big win of your own. Right now, all the new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $150, and you can spend that on spreads, you can look at futures, you can look at money lines, you can look at player props as well. All you got to do is get that first bet at $5 to win, and then you get the $150. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA. I don't know why I'm saying it twice, but I am going to say it twice. Not Locked NBA, Locked On. Sign up, get started. FanDuel. Don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, they're the two main players on this team. What about Terry Rozier? Came across in that trade from the Hornets, put up some really big numbers early in the season when LaMelo Ball went down, and then just completely faded away. And I don't know this for certain, but it's a great indicator, him and even a Kelly Oubre Jr., of leaving a terrible team like that and going on to a real team. Where do your numbers fit? Because he was like barely a top 100 player. And then he didn't even end the season anyway, dealing with a neck problem. Rozier's 30. He played 33 minutes a night. Most of the time, or some of the time in Miami, he was playing without Tyler Herro as well. So when those two are together, how does that all look? His ADP was 80, which is obviously pretty low actually for Rozier. So he beat it. 57 was his -1. 78th on Yahoo, 57th in points. So actually some good value. But I do worry if you look at full season numbers for Rozier, you might get a little bit misled moving forward. 20 points, 2.5 threes, 4 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1 steal. Shot 44 from the field and 87 from the line. 50% on his twos. You'd like a little bit more there. He shot 36% on his threes. Again, you'd hope you get a little bit extra out of him there, especially playing a smaller sort of usage role, which is exactly where we're at the moment with him on this team with Jimmy. But I feel this team they're always trying to do something, never really succeeding, but they're always trying to do something in terms of you're getting a new player in or you're making big moves or whatever. But his usage went from 27 to 24 in Charlotte versus Miami. His true shooting went from 58 to 53. His rim finishing went from 58 to 51. His assist rate went from 30 to 23. Like, maybe the only one I can say there is like, why would the rim finishing drop? Moving teams, like that one could probably bounce back. But usage, assist rate, like no real indication that they're going to have a big chance of bumping back up. The best comps for him were CJ McCollum in the year that he was traded from Portland to New Orleans and year 9 of Joe Johnson. He was 74th in EPM percentile and Crafted had him 47th percentile, so pretty poor. What I really don't like when looking at these numbers, he's adjusted defensive turnover number, 10th percentile, just not generating defensive events. And we know he's never been a high steal guy, but when you move into a situation where you're not getting these primary ball handling responsibilities and when you're not getting this high usage, got to do something else. And like the 5.6 assists is just not a real number to expect to hold in Miami. And then you've got to start to worry about like these 20 points and 2 threes and 1 steal. Where do they fit? He's past the cliff, the aging cliff. He's 30. Not to say he's going to be bad, but it's hard to see big improvements coming. So I would not be touching him around the 57. No way. I think that ADP of 80 is probably going to be reasonable again. Probably going to find him in the 90s, to be honest, given how he played in Miami. Let's talk about the guy that he did replace because of injury a lot of the time, and that was Tyler Herro, who only played 42 games, 34 minutes a night. He's still only 24, Tyler. I would say the best season he's ever had was when he was playing as a sixth man, but he hated doing that, demanded that he started. They acquiesced, and I'm not sure it's gone that well. Like I think at times he gets too much hate, but I don't know. I don't really know where this goes. He was 69th in -1 rankings. 65th in points. ADP was 69. That's all bang on. Yahoo had him 205th, of course, because he barely played. 21-5 with 4.5 assists. That rebounding is very impressive. 3 threes. The 0.7 steals is putrid. 0.1 blocks, 44 and 86, 48 from 2, 40 from 3. You want the 2-point number up over 50. That'd be good if you could get to that. The rebounding really strong. So if I'm going to lean on one way, is Tyler Herro overrated or underrated? I actually probably lean a little bit towards underrated. And I would almost definitely take him ahead of Terry Rozier next season. And it's just, he's the guy that we look at like Bam, for example, or if Jimmy goes, like who takes on a larger role, it's probably him. You're going to have always efficiency issues and lack of defense. But I still do think there's maybe 1 to 2 extra levels. Now, the question is going to be, does this translate into a good team or a winning team? And I don't know that. His advanced stuff was all right. 82nd percentile EPM, 65th in CPM. His box creation was 89th percentile, which is a pretty strong number. We know what box creation is. A stat, not just like how many assists or what your shooting usage is. It's like, what are you doing to run an offense, create for your team. Just a general idea of your offensive creation value. And this was his best ever season doing that. So it's on the way up. And with Rozier there, very interesting to see that they didn't play a huge amount together, but interesting to see that they're pushing up. And I think with Jimmy pushing back down, that might go further forward. Now, the player comps for him are a little bit troubling. Year 4, Kobe White. So that's last season's Kobe White. Before this season's Kobe White. And year 3 of Shelvin Mack. Yikes. Now, he's a terrible defender, obviously Herro. But the rebounding is strong. The passing is okay. The shooting is okay. Just, I don't know. There are just a few things that do hold him back. But I do think he can be better than this for fantasy at some point. I didn't know whether I include this guy as one of the starters, but I am going to do it because he started quite a lot. He was in their most common starting line. So hard to ignore Duncan Robinson, who is now 30. Out of being completely out of the rotation last season, he played 68 games and 28 minutes a night. But we did actually see a pretty common thing. When Herro was out, Robinson started and was good. And when Herro played, Robinson came off the bench, minutes were cut way down, didn't do anything. Now, you could make an argument, is it better to have Robinson in between Butler and Rozier and Herro playing 33 minutes off the bench? Maybe. But that's not what they did. So Duncan ended up 149th in -1, 137th on Yahoo. He averaged 13 points with 2.8 threes, 2.5 rebounds, 2.8 assists, no defense to discuss. 40% on his threes, 58 on his twos is huge. 89 from the line. Obviously, he doesn't turn it over because he doesn't really pass much. But in saying that, I thought that his inside the arc game was much improved. I thought his passing game was much improved. I thought he took big steps forward this season. You'll be absolutely not shocked at all, and this is actually really comical to me, that the best comp for Duncan Robinson this season was year 8. That's when he was with Chicago, year 8 of Kyle Korver. Of course it is. And year 7 of Seth Curry, which I believe was the season that Seth was Philadelphia, maybe? Can't remember that one. In terms of the shooting quality, Duncan Robinson ranked 100th percentile, so one of the best shooters in the NBA. That's not really surprising. He had good volume, difficult shots, hit them well, hit his twos well, did some good stuff inside the arc as well. I think you probably can benefit from playing him in a slightly different role versus that 20-minute bench role. Like the starting role probably makes more sense. But also, like I mentioned, when we talked about that starting group being a -5 and the lineup that had Herro and Caleb Martin there being a +5, well, that's another sort of thing that Spoelstra's got to figure out. Now, I don't think we care at all about Duncan Robinson for fantasy. 149th is great, but it's not actually great. What am I talking about? It's not great at all. It's just totally replaceable in totality. When Herro was out, though, he was a definite guy we rostered. And this is all going to come down to opportunity. Is he playing 33 minutes a night? And how long will he be able to maintain this level of shooting? Maybe decent enough, but so much of his game is a physicality to it. Not like, when I say physical, a lot of people think, well, that's what happens in the 80s. You get clothesline. No, I'm talking about the running, the off-screen stuff, the constant motion, the constant movement. That's the physicality. And as you get older, all that stuff sort of drops down a little bit. So that's where you get some of those worries moving forward. And obviously, defense sucks. Let's talk about this guy as a starter as well. And that's Caleb Martin. He was sort of in and out of the lineup. I actually thought that people would buy in a little bit more to what he did in that playoff series. I give credit to people for being smart because, I field a lot of questions from people, and there was plenty of people who were telling me they were going to draft him so high and how awesome he was. I go, look, bro, we've seen a literal whole season of him being a starter and you wanted nothing to do with him in fantasy, and then the exact same thing happened here. 29 games, 27 minutes a night, 214th in -1. He was drafted in 13% of leagues, but last round flyer pick, but I don't think there was really any upside in that. He averaged 10 with 1.3 triples, 4.5 rebounds, 2 assists, 0.7 steals, shot 43 and 78. Just 35% from 3. And honestly, this is just who he is. This is just the player he is. He can have hot streaks, he has cold streaks, he does mid stuff right across the board. His best comp was Devin George in year 7 and then Dorian Finney-Smith in the traded year between Dallas and Brooklyn, year 7-2. Which they are just guys who do interesting defensive stuff, low volume counting stats, okay shooting, and like just a 7th, 8th man type of player. And that's really what I think Martin is. And this is when I criticize the Heat's roster and say that they've got no depth. It's because this guy has to be pushed into start at so many times and he's not good enough for that. 52nd percentile EPM, 67th in crafted plus minus, which is totally reasonable. True shooting at 21st percentile is disgusting. Like that's really, really bad efficiency. And it needs to be way better than that. He's 29, so we're starting to hit the area of like, I'm not really sure where this goes. I know that if you are looking to build a super strong contending team, then he's your 7th man playing 22 minutes a night. That is how I would look at it. But the way the roster currently is doesn't really allow them to have that, but he's never going to be a good fantasy player. The last player I want to talk about as part of the starters is Little Chungus, Nikola Jovic. Now, I did not like the draft pick of Nikola Jovic, not because he was drafted by the Heat. I just didn't like him as a prospect. Although, to be fair, I think he was getting mocked at around pick 18 or something, and I said, I'm not interested in that at all. I'm more back end of the first, early second, and that's where he ended up going. So maybe I'm pushing back here. People say, man, I can't believe how far he slid. I went, to me, that was sort of where he should have been. I thought he was relatively poor his rookie season. Still really young, obviously. I thought he was relatively poor for the first half of this season. He would come out and have one big game and all of the Heat would jump on. Look at this. This is what you could have had for Dame. And then he would do nothing for 5 weeks and be out of the rotation. But he's 21 now. The second half of the season, I thought he showed enough to go, there's some flashes here. There are some flashes of what we are seeing towards the end of the season. He only played 19 minutes a night, and I do worry he might be a little bit of a placeholder starter again. But I don't think it's outrageous to say, well, the Heat should say, year 3, Jovic, we're going to start him and play him like a legit starter, play him 30 minutes a night, and let's see what happens. He averaged almost 8 points with 1.5 threes in 19 minutes, 4 rebounds and 2 assists with half a steal, shooting 45 and 70, 53 on 2s and 40 on 3s. The 40 on 3s, really strong. Overall, the percentages are pretty weak. The defensive stuff is terrible. Like, they're terrible defensive stats. But when I say my eyes bugged when I saw this, they bugged. The best comp for year 2 of Little Chungus was the 3rd season for Jason Tatum. Not rookie year Jason Tatum, year 3 of Jason Tatum. I went, okay. Now, thankfully, I was able to be pulled back because the second best comp was year 3 of Justice Winslow. It's like, okay, that's better. But just having something that's sort of resembling Tatum is like, makes me go, okay, that's interesting. It is possible to change your mind on players. It is possible. I won't do it after a week. I won't do it after a month. I'd do it after a period of time. And he did impress me. I still don't know that he's going to be a star or he's going to be this huge fantasy guy or anything like that. But he was impressive over the last, say, 30-odd games. It's all about, to me, what they do with the minutes. He is still 21. He hasn't even turned 21 yet. But do they give him those extra minutes? What does his fantasy game actually translate to? Because, that's low scoring, low volume, rebounds, no defense, bad shooting. It looks pretty poor as a fantasy line. But there's just, if he took one of those things that you can't really project, like a gigantic leap out of nowhere, I'm not going to say I'm going to be massively surprised at this point. The other thing that stood out to me, like 73rd percentile EPM, like what? 75th percentile crafted? What? Okay, well, here we go. Passer rating, 69th percentile. Oh, with that, are we? You're flashing that level of passing. That's really interesting. The 3-point shooting, the passing improvement, defense still a problem. Yeah, just enough there to make me look at it and go, let's see where this goes. Let's talk about some other players of note on this squad. Because there are other players. And there's the guy that I have almost never seen as much bean flicking about than I saw with the hottest 100 himself, Jaime Jaquez Jr. The way that media sites, social media accounts twisted themselves to tell you that this guy was, how do you let him fall? And I'll never get over it. I'll never get over 6 weeks into the season saying that he would go top 3 in a redraft. Yeah, hearing. I know it's Bill Simmons, but I think he was talking to KOC, saying like I had to listen to that. I had to clip it out and do like a reaction TikTok to it, and I don't do that. How are you saying this? What are you talking about? Can we all calm down? Heat culture has us in a massive chokehold. Jaime Jaquez started the season with shooting which was nothing to do with anything that he's done in 4 years at UCLA. Nothing. Jaime Jaquez is not the perfect Heat guy. How did you let him slip? Blah, blah, blah. He is a 23-year-old role player, I believe, who has some good games here and there. He's still a little bit buried on this team, and he probably does. I did not think he was a first-round player. Well, that's not true. I think I had him at the end of the first. He's exceeded some of my expectations, but I think the idea that this is a future star is laughable. He's a 4th or 5th starter, best case at peak of his career, I believe. But we saw he almost was taken out of the rotation towards the end of the season. Came back and played some decent games in the playoffs, absolutely. But there was just so much around the narrative of Jaquez that was crazy. And this is never going to be the be-all and end-all, but when you looked at all of his advanced metrics in that hot run where everyone was, going after the luscious locks, they were all bad. He was like a huge negative in on-off. His EPM was like really low. His Darko was low. Everything was bad. And it gave you the idea of, oh yeah, okay, like counting stats are accumulating, but I don't think he's playing well. He ended up 186th. He wasn't drafted anywhere in the preseason. And what you will notice is that Yahoo has the data of preseason and then full season ADP, but they also have this percentage of leagues drafted in, which just encompasses everything. So he was not drafted in any league before the season, but with people who did drafts after the season started, he got drafted in 7% of leagues because there was, overall 7%. And that's like, I would say he was drafted relatively high in quite a few of those leagues. 12-4 with 2.6 assists and a steal. He shot 49 and 81, including 56 on 2s and 32 on 3s, which is basically in line with what he was as a player at UCLA. A poor 3-point shooter who's not bad with his 2s, but not great. Not a huge stat accumulator. Yeah, it is hard with Rozier and Herro and Butler and all that there. And when multiple guys went down, Jaquez had the ability to scale up, and that is an impressive trait, and that is something that we do have to value, and I do value that. But overall, I just don't see a team ever going, right, Jaime's now our number 2, so he'll have all these roles no matter what, and then we build around that. I don't see that. But we can move on. We can move on. We can disagree on that. The best comp for him is a bloke I've legitimately never heard of, Mike O'Corrin in year 2. And then it was year 5 of CJ Miles. That's interesting. 57th percentile EPM, 42nd CPM. Offensive load. I included this because he was 56th percentile. So he didn't do a huge amount offensively. So if you're going to look for a silver lining, and I'm always, even if a player I think is being overrated or I don't like as a player or I don't like their game, I'm always going to look for things that either tell us something that drags them down from the general consensus or a little silver lining of things that maybe can get better. And there's definitely that part of it. Like that is a pretty low offensive load for a guy that had some opportunities to do some stuff offensively. I just think overall the shooting is probably never going to be good enough. And I don't think he can handle a gigantic usage role. Role player, great, and that is not an insult. It's not a dirty word. Third best player on a low-end playoff team? Maybe. Fifth starter on a good team? Probably. Ever going to be a top 60 fantasy player? I would have my doubts. The minutes were there. He played 28 minutes. And that's why I also included the offensive load. He wasn't asked to do a huge amount. And that will improve as he gets better, as he gets older and more experienced. That will improve. But I think that you could look at his season from the first half versus the second half, and they are stark contrasts. And as in nearly all these cases, the reality lies somewhere in the middle. I'm only going to talk about one more player, and that's another guy who was almost as variable as the hottest 100 himself, and that is Haywood Highsmith. He's 27. He's a restricted free agent, like we talked about. 66 games, 21 minutes a night. Finished 258th in -1 with 6 points, 1 3, 3 rebounds, 0.8 steals, and half a block, shooting 47 and 64. He shot 56 on his twos and 40% on his threes, which I think is a little fluky. Overall, he would have the occasional good game. He'd have the random 4-block game and score 20 points on 6 of 7 shooting. And we'd all go, oh, maybe we do this. And then he would shoot 0% and play 5 minutes. And while it's always a great story, undrafted player that he developed, I don't, again, when you look at the roster in your 6, 7, 8 slot held up with Haywood Highsmith, Caleb Martin, even like, say, whatever Jovic was the 27th pick in the draft, a 23-year-old rookie and Jaime Jaquez, the depth is not really here on this team. So maybe they bring him back, maybe they don't. I don't think there's ever going to be him developing into being a regular sort of starter level player. The best comps for him are the low usage, high 3-point attempt rate, good shot blocking forwards in Mo Harkless from year 8, and actually rookie year Maxi Kleber, but that's like his age 27 season because he came across from Germany. And those are all really strong role players, and they had some occasional fantasy moments. Harkless was always a nice steals, blocks, and threes guy. Kleber was a blocks and threes guy. I think that's what Highsmith maybe can get to, but he's got a lot of inconsistencies. EPM 50th percentile, Kraft at him 57th percentile. That's all really strong for a basic nobody. 13th percentile offensive load. They just asked him to do nothing offensively. And it is very, very rare for a player that does nothing offensively like that to ever develop into a reliable fantasy prospect or even a very good NBA starter unless you are a center. But even then, that is just a minuscule number. Really, really small. And that's your Miami Heat. Do you think that I was unfair on them? Maybe you probably do, actually. I think that we worry a little bit about what the hell happens with Jimmy Butler. We worry about Rozier's next season. I think there is a pretty decent potential on Jovic, and I think he's going to be a very interesting later round pick next season. He's still really young. I think Jaquez will have some better seasons if he's pushed into a larger role, but will always be one of those ones that if he gets pushed into a larger role, we'd be looking, we probably need to update our roster because we don't want him in this larger role. It was a good one for Jaquez, I think, is maybe like a Josh Hart type of career. Really good player, obviously. Maybe that's where he can get to. So tell me, Heat fans, you're going to be here. I know you are. So in the comments, tell me to quit my job. Tell me how dare you doubt Jimmy Butler, Heat culture, Pat Riley. Do it. Drop it all down below. Tell your friends to go and do it as well. Guys, I don't know if I've hit this button, but I'll hit it again now. There it is. Thumb it up. Leave your comments. And subscribe. Draft prospect stuff coming this week. I'm excited. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.